Welcome to Miss Smith's Superstars. Our classroom consists of 27 bright, enthusiastic and talented students in Year 4, 5, 6 at Sandy Plains State School. We can't forget the brilliant Miss Allison who works with us throughout the day. The following presentation is based on our literacy unit, Mystical, Magical and Fanatical. The intended outcome for the unit is for students to create a mystical, magical or fanatical narrative that appeals to a particular audience and contains an orientation, complication, series of events and resolution. The students have already begun to create their mystical, magical and fanatical narrative. Throughout this presentation, we will look at how we cater for the needs of all of our students within the class. This is done through differentiation, teaching strategies, and resources that all complement each other to ensure that each of our students are a superstar. We are a multi-age class with a range of ability levels from Year 2 to 6. We have a gifted student who has a particular interest in science and maths, and 3 ESL students with Indigenous heritage. Differentiation is important in our class to ensure that each student's needs are met. It is also important that differentiation is subtle but appropriate to the student's needs to ensure all students are comfortable within the classroom. Although the class is Year 4, 5, 6, the students' literacy ability levels range from Year 2 to Year 6 and are particularly low. According to data taken from the My School profile, the Year 4 and 5 students struggle in reading and spelling. An example of differentiation can be seen in Lesson 2. You will see that Year 4 and 5 students are grouped together for their English lesson. Firstly, this is due to the intended outcomes for the English lesson. Secondly, the lessons support their need for explicit teaching and constructivism. For example, the lesson begins with a whole class warm-up of their prior knowledge, the Walt and the Wilf. Students then break off into their groups. I take the Year 4 and 5 students, 17 in total, and Miss Allison, who is a confident, well-respected teacher's aide, takes the Year 6 students, 10 in total. To introduce the concept of a narrative and increase the students' reading levels in Year 4 and 5, for 20 minutes at the beginning of each lesson, we read a chapter of The Magician's Elephant by Kate DeCamillion. The Magician's Elephant was chosen because of its storyline as it relates to the overall learning intention. Also, the structure. It's a narrative with a clear orientation, complication, series of events and a resolution, and can be read along and correspond with the student's learning intention for that lesson. The book is available as an ebook and will be up on the smartboard as I am reading to scaffold the students' reading ability. Students will also be asked a series of questions, explicit and open throughout the reading to gauge their understanding. Their knowledge and understanding will also be shown through the narrative. The Year 6 students are all of similar ability levels, and Miss Allison is confident and has the ability to explicitly work with the students to build on their understanding of text structure and organisation through open questioning. There is one gifted student in Year 6 who is particularly interested in science and maths but shows very little interest in English. This student is at the required literacy rate for their age. To cater for the student's need, I have implemented 2 strategies for differentiation. Firstly, the content descriptor allows a student to use his personal preferences and interests to create a narrative of their choice. Secondly, the use of the resource Storyboard That will allow the student to become interested in English as they can see it can become useful in their everyday life. There are 3 ESL students in the class, 2 in Year 5 and 1 in Year 6. To cater for the students' needs in Year 4 and 5, I have introduced a triorama to support their learning. The triorama is a creative literacy project that allows students to physically create their narrative before they write it. Students are required to construct their narrative through their hands, therefore giving them a deeper understanding of the intended outcome of creating a narrative that appeals to a particular audience. For the Year 6 ESL student, Miss Allison, who has worked closely with Miss Kath, the IEW, will use a large A2 piece of butcher's paper and a permanent marker to write down key words throughout the lesson. These will follow on each lesson so the student can clearly see the steps they need to take to write a narrative. Miss Allison knows that the questions she will ask need to be clear and concise and adapted to ensure that the student understands. Miss Allison's questioning will start off at low-level knowledge-based questions and move on to higher-order questioning. After Miss Allison's question session, the student will then work with me explicitly to construct their narrative. Explicit teaching is used when a new concept or idea is being taught. Explicit teaching is appropriate for the class because it allows the content to be taught explicitly to all students, therefore reducing the gap between ability levels. To ensure that no student falls behind due to ability levels, it is important that with explicit teaching we move into similar ability levels defined by Year 4 and 5 and Year 6, and that the appropriate content is taught. This allows me to obtain a better understanding of the student's knowledge, identify the weak spots, and also be able to improve the student's learning next lesson. The Wald and Wilf at the beginning of each lesson are simple strategies in explicit teaching that allow students to know what we are learning for the lesson and what I as a teacher am looking for by the end of the lesson. Giving students a standard at the beginning of the lesson which they need to achieve by the end of the lesson allows them to have a direct learning path. Working explicitly with the Year 4-5 students, I can get a better understanding of the student's knowledge and ability level to understand the text structure of a narrative. Working explicitly with the Year 6 students with a program Storyboard That, I can explicitly teach the students the purpose for creating text in different formats and how it can appeal to their audience. At the beginning of the lesson, open questioning and the 5 W's and a H are used to gain students' prior knowledge from the previous lesson. This open questioning sets a base for where the students to begin. At the beginning of the lesson, open questioning and the 5 W's and a H are used to gain students' prior knowledge from the previous lesson's learning intention. This open questioning sets a base for where to begin the lesson with reflection. Moving to the reading with Year 4 and 5, explicit questioning is used while I am reading the chapter to gauge students' understanding, and open probing questions are used at the end of the chapter to build on their knowledge. Starting off at lower level questioning allows the lower ability students to attain the prerequisite knowledge and skills which allow them to answer higher order questions. It will allow students to feel more confident in their answer while also requiring students to think alternatively. The lessons are set up to scaffold students' learning. This works particularly well with the variability levels and the ESL students. The anxiety and fear of writing a narrative for the ESL students is reduced as it is broken up over 9 lessons with supporting aids. Each lesson looks at a different component of the narrative students' learning, as it is scaffolded through either making a triorama to deepen their knowledge and understanding, or use the program Storyboard That to create an animated narrative. Breaking down the narrative in smaller steps allows myself and the student opportunities to offer feedback and reflection time. This reflection time is at the end of each lesson and is an integral part in constructivism. Problem-based learning is a component of constructivism. It is an appropriate strategy for the gifted student who is particularly interested in science and maths. The student enjoys science and maths because they like the feeling they get when they solve a problem. The Year 6 students take on a more active role as I step back and become a facilitator. The problem the students are facing is to create a narrative through storyboard that which is interesting and will wow their audience. The first problem that the student faces is determining the title and the orientation of the narrative. The students then move through the steps of creating a narrative. The texts that are used within the lessons are appropriate to the Year 4-5 intended outcomes. Students are to create a narrative that is mystical, magical, and fanatical. The Magician's Elephant by Kate de Camillion supports students' learning by providing an example of a mystical or magical narrative that appeals to a wide audience. The story is about a boy named Peter who is looking for his sister. A titled magician has one last chance to wow the audience with a trick which has never been attempted. The only way Peter can find his sister is through the elephant, which might just disappear forever. The chapters are read corresponding to learning intentions. For example, orientation, complications, series of events, and resolution. This text scaffolds the student's learning. The 3 types of adventure task requires Year 6 students to use their higher order thinking skills as they understand how authors innovate text structures with language features to achieve a particular purpose. This supports students' learning as they can turn this newly learned knowledge to their own narrative. The smartboard is used constantly throughout the lesson. Firstly, it is used to display the previous lesson's discussion for warm-up. Secondly, it is used to display the what and the with for the entire lesson so students have a visual reference. Thirdly, it is used to display the ebook version of The Magician's Elephant to support students' reading and help students understand that texts vary in structure, complexity, and variety. The class set of laptops are used by the Year 6 students for the creation of their narrative. Storyboard That is a digital storytelling program and will be used on the class set of laptops. This supports students by developing their ability to use ICTs and seeing how text can be used in different ways. Students can use different language features to please their audience. The triorama supports students' learning by providing a visual representation of their narrative. This supports students of lower ability levels and ESL students through developing their lower level knowledge skills into higher knowledge skills through scaffolding. Students will still need to create a written narrative, but it will be easy as they have a visual representation that they can work off. The ability to physically see their narrative before their eyes allow the ability gaps within the class to be shortened. It also allows students to see that realistic and fantasy text can be developed in different ways. As you can see, in our classroom, I want every student to be the best they can. From subtly differentiating the learning experience, to implementing teaching strategies that encourage students and by providing resources that are interesting and support the students' needs, we can overcome the differences within our classroom.